Welcome, everyone, to the Success Elevated podcast. As always, I am your host, Hayden Lee, and I am joined by our largest group of people yet here on the episode. Joined by a big group of people. We're going to talk about some awesome things. Part 2 of this series that we're doing here at Spot On Solutions with SuperTech U and OCS, talking about all things customer service and how to grow your business through developing and selling to customers, and then really building that good and great client relationship afterwards. And that's mostly what we're going to be talking about today. So client relationship, building that with your customers, and how to train your employees to build those great relationships, and ultimately how to make those relationships work for you and end up getting paid that much quicker down the road. So that's what we're going to be talking a little bit about today. First and foremost, I'm going to spend some time introducing everybody. We have a large group. I want to make sure everybody gets their due today. First, I want to introduce my teammates here on the Success Elevated podcast. Have hosted a bunch of episodes with me, both managing partners here at Spot On Solutions, Katie Harris and Derek Priest. Thanks for coming on the show today, Katie, Derek.
Thanks,
Great
Hayden.
to be here.
Super exciting. Next, we have returning guests on the podcast, Larry Wilberton and Eric Sprague from SuperTech U. Larry, Eric, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure to be here with everybody.
And then last but not least, we have the dynamic duo over at OCS, Jeremy Traasdahl and Josh Ehmke. Josh, Jeremy, thank you both for joining us. It's going to be a fun podcast today.
Thanks for having us.
I'm not going to lie. Hayden's been a little bit nervous about what it looks like to do a podcast with all 6 of us, you guys.
This is going to be, look, I was talking to Katie earlier. I was like, how do I possibly keep Derek and Larry on task here for the next hour? And I just don't know how it's going to happen. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen.
You just don't. You let it roll, man.
You just got to let it go. Hayden,
well, it's going to be awesome. I think we're going to hit at some really great topics today, and we're going to do our best to try and hit all the points, but also have a little bit of fun. So this is going to be great. What we wanted to talk about today, I'll kind of introduce that, and then we'll just dive right in and start getting everyone's feedback and answering some questions here. But what we wanted to talk most about today was building these customer relationships. Ultimately, you're getting, as a restoration business owner, you're trying to grow your business. Let's say your sales team's kicking butt and they're getting lots of leads and they're bringing them to your door, and it's awesome. But how do you make sure that those leads turn into work for your team and ultimately, help you grow your business and get paid down the road? And that's going to be the main focus of what we're going to talk about today in kind of a big picture way. But the first thing that I feel like is probably the most crucial piece to this is properly training and preparing your team, your technicians, your BDRs, your CSRs, so that they can really build these relationships and for lack of a better term, help your customers through this journey of dealing with this restoration incident that's gone on with them. So that's, I think, kind of the first piece here. And Katie and I had a podcast a couple of weeks ago where we talked about this subject, about training employees. And Katie, I know our philosophy here at Spot On Solutions has changed over the years as we've learned different ways to train and develop our employees. But if you wouldn't mind, kind of talk a little bit about your philosophy when it comes to training and developing your employees.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad it's changed over the years, because for a long time there was no training. It was literally like, hey, welcome to the team. Go figure it out. So I'm glad it's changed, because we started with no training, and we had to learn the importance of really investing in our team. And so I think that's one of the mindsets that starts to change as your team grows, as your business grows, is, man, I got a most valuable asset I have at this business is my team. And how am I going to go invest in them so that they go out and represent my brand and they take care of my clients the way I would? Actually, better than I would. That's the goal, right? And that's what I see when you bring on team members and they really are a good part of your culture, and they get the training and they get the things that they need, they go out and they do a better job even. And that's the goal.
Big time. Derek, one of the things that I hear a lot from my clients here at Spot On Solutions as a challenge, maybe outside of marketing, is technician and employee turnover, right? Like that's a huge issue that a lot of restoration business owners face. And we had a conversation the other day internally. We were onboarding some new employees, and our HR director is a gentleman named Shane Campbell, said the number one reason new employees leave a company after, or burn out within the first year is because of training. They haven't been properly trained. When you owned a restoration company, was this a common challenge you saw as well? What were some things maybe you did to try and kind of mitigate some of that burnout and some of that turnover?
I think yes, it is a big challenge. It was a challenge for me as well too. Because number one, like, I think business owners, like, we start a business, we pour our blood, our sweat, our tears in it. Like Katie said, like at the beginning, we didn't have any training because, well, it was us, right?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
It was all here in our heads. And then we hire employees, and I know for me personally, I just feel like, always felt like if you tell them what to do, they're gonna automatically, they'll do what you tell them to do. And then assume that it's gonna happen, but very, very little training. I figure, you know what? These people have common sense. I hired them. They must be pretty smart. Of course they'll do what I tell them to do, but I did a very, very bad job of actually training them, and never did I have, at least, especially in the beginning, have policies and training procedures down where they could access those. It's all in our head, and we try to like push that off on our employees. And then when they don't get it, or they don't do it like we think that that they should be doing it, we get upset, and like we figure, hey, this is never going to work. They're not a right fit, so they need to be going down the road. And we've invested time and energy, and I won't say, and money, on crappy training or the lack of training,
right,
just to have them leave or us to fire them. And I think most of the time when employees leave due to lack of training, it's because the leadership failed them in getting them trained.
Totally. And I think that's probably the first initial step. Is it takes some self-awareness, right? To be like, oh, this isn't the employee's fault. I mean, there's always going to be special cases where, there just wasn't a fit. They just didn't want to work, whatever it is. But it requires some self-awareness to kind of look internally and be like, I should have done better as a leader, and decided I'm going to do better in the future and offer more training.
Yeah.
And some of that
Hayden,
training.
Jump
Go
in
ahead.
real quick?
Go ahead, Eric.
I agree with everything you said, but I think there's also really two other elements to that. Of the three, I mean, the other one is having systems, so they actually know how to do the job. That there's a process.
I've never been on a podcast with you, Eric, or even a conversation where the word systems didn't come out of your mouth.
I have a system for everything.
System guru
for everything.
But his favorite words,
like,
okay, Katie?
The reason being is Howard Partridge did this at a conference once, and it really struck me. He got a whole bunch of people up on stage, and they did the game of telephone where they say something and then it goes down the line. And then by the time it gets to the last person, it's completely different. That's what a business with no systems looks like. So the person who's at the end of the telephone line has been getting bad information. And then now their manager, owner, whatever, is giving them a hard time, but they were set up to fail because they didn't have that structure in place. And then also frequent reviews so that they know where they stand and they know what they need to work on. Those are also elements of people and why they leave it. The reason I know that is because Larry and I, like Katie was saying, we didn't do any of that stuff early on. And our front door was like a turnstile. Couldn't keep anybody in the building, but it was our fault. 100%.
And also, those are the things that people resist the most, is putting systems in the business and reviewing their team. They just think they dread doing either one of those, which slows down the whole process of getting somewhere where you want to go in the long run, which is a huge problem.
Yeah. you know, again, when Katie and I talked a couple of weeks ago, Katie, I thought you had some awesome feedback on this, and your advice for new business owners was you have to carve out some of your schedule every week devoted to what you're talking about, Larry, Eric, like developing a training system and reviewing with your team. Katie, you said just, hey, carve out 3 hours a week. And I know that sounds probably like a ton to a lot of our clients and restoration business owners, but if you can carve out a few hours a week to devote to building a training system and, or, you know, reviewing that system with your team, it's going to make all the difference, really. Katie, did you come up with that number, the 3 hours a week? Was that just kind of an arbitrary number that you threw out, or was that something that you've just learned from experience? Why 3 hours a week?
I got challenged by a coach one time. Like, you got to, first of all, I got told, get in your lane, right? Like, figure out the lane that you're in. Are you in the sales lane? Are you in the systems lane, the operations lane, the collections, the admin, whatever? What is your lane? Get in it and then learn it. And so my lane ended up being people in training. And I realized like I did not know anywhere close to what I needed to know to do that right. Wow. Right. And so I had a coach one time that told me, you've got to find time. And I remember not knowing what that would look like there, where that would come from. And he's like, 3 hours. He's like, you live by your calendar. So put it on your calendar and guard it. And I think that that's been a rule I've tried to apply to a lot of different things, whether it's a big project or something I need to do, like that. If you can find 3 hours, right, and you put it in the calendar and you guard it, nothing gets booked on top of it. Nothing, like, you just, it's kind of sacred time, because without that focus, things can get off track. And I, you know, I'm looking at like Jeremy and Josh, and I'm thinking like, that is the perfect example of systems. I give Eric a hard time about talking about systems because I think systems suck. I think they're so hard. Like, they are the answer. They're always the answer.
Yeah, but once you practice putting them into play, because I was similar to you, Katie, but I'm hanging out with Eric for so long. Once you get into a practice of putting them in play, it's not as difficult at all. And I'm a high eye, and systems aren't even on my radar, but it's a practice just like anything else. You just got to work the muscle.
Well, I look at like Jeremy and Josh, I always laugh because I'm like, you guys take the part of the business all my restoration clients complain about the most. Like, I always am like, what made you decide, like, I'm going to take this part of the business that everybody hates the most, and we're going to do it all the time. Like, and I look at it and it's like, you mastered systems, right? Is that fair?
Absolutely. Yeah. Go ahead, Jeremy.
I was just gonna say I'm on Eric's team on this one. I'm all about we call it policies and procedures, right? So systems, policies, and procedures, same thing. Josh has heard me say that 1,000 times. And the way I kind of look at it is there's this, water pipe, right? We're in restoration, right? And so every time there's a hole that pops up, we're spending all of our time trying to cover them, right? But if we can put preventative policies or preventative procedures, then we never have to worry about that same hole coming out of that same part of the pipe. And now the water gets to go. As business owners, we'll always continue to have these, right? That we don't know are coming. But as the longer you're in business, the less time you're doing the less time you're spending trying to prevent these things, because you've done it over the past 6, 7, 8 years. You've created this flow, and then one comes up every 3 weeks versus one coming up every 3 hours, right? And so I'm with Eric on this one. Josh is, I think he was resistant at first, I think, on this as well, but he's seen the light since we've been in business so long together.
I think the whole reason there's resistance is it's hard.
That's right, Katie. It can be difficult, but to the point, it's even more difficult if you don't have those systems in place. OCS has been so successful because of these procedures that we put in place, and any procedure system is only as good as it is being enforced. And if you want to make Jeremy mad, break one of his systems. You will see fire like you've never seen before. And so, yes, you got to put the systems in place, but don't deviate from those systems either. You got to have that policy and procedure in place and follow it always.
And, you're going to spend the time. We talked, Hayden, about time. I'm with Jeremy on this, right? Like, so you're either going to spend the time building the system you're spending that time times 10 probably putting out fires anyway. So just take the time. I mean, look, it wasn't easy in our restoration business. I'd go work all day, my normal, running around selling losses and checking jobs. And then I'd go home and eat and then sit for 2 hours every single night building systems. But you know what? Over time, all of a sudden, my life got easier and easier and easier. So, it's kind of like you're front loading, paying the dues, but then you reap the benefit forever after.
So you hear what he just said there, Hayden, right? Like he had to set a specific amount of time.
Yeah.
Right.
Every day or so many days a week. Because if we don't, those things that are hard, they don't happen because everything else will always take precedent over it. And so that's where that thing of like block the time, whatever that priority is, block the time and then stick to it.
Yeah. And I think there's, give yourself some grace. Like it's not going to happen. Change like this is not going to happen overnight, but yeah, blocking that time every week, sticking to the system, enforcing the system when it's in place. Like, those steps are not going to happen overnight, but being willing to just spend the time to work on it is going to, it's going to make all the difference. And I love the concept of, what is the phrase? There's a phrase out there that's like, an ounce of preparation is worth a pound of pain or something. There's something like that, right? Where it's like, if you do a little bit of preparation, it's just going to save you all the headache down the road. So it makes a ton of difference. This conversation is perfect because it leads right kind of into this next step, right? We've trained our employees. We've got some systems in place, maybe some technical systems so that they know how to do some certain things, do a dry out or take care of some drywall that's having some problems, whatever's going on. You've built some technical systems, right? I think kind of the next piece of this is talking to you, Eric and Larry, a little bit more specifically about how do you really start building a 5-star customer service experience? Because as we all know, there's much more to owning a restoration business and having really awesome technicians. There's much more to it than just being really good at mitigation, right? There's a lot more to this business. And so, I want to pose, Eric, we've talked a little bit about some of these systems. I'm going to pose this question first to Larry, because I think there are technicians in the world that are really good at the technical side, but maybe aren't great at some of these soft skills, like being able to talk to people. And Larry, I enjoy talking to people. I feel like you're a person that really enjoys talking to people and meeting new people. You've probably had technicians in the past that maybe weren't as naturally good at that as you are. So how do you train and coach and build a system to teach someone how to be good at talking to customers? What's kind of that step? Well, how do you start doing something like that?
It's really easy. What you do is subscribe to SuperTech University and you watch Eric's lessons every single day. You're going to be perfect.
That's it.
That's all
Podcast
you
over.
do. And we'll wrap
No.
up the podcast. Okay, thanks everybody for
It's-
coming here today. That's
Stop
great.
It's a system.
I'm going to send you your bill
Dropping
for
the mic.
promoing yourself on here, Larry. That's what I'm going to do. I'm gonna send you an invoice.
We're going to cut that whole part out. That part's going to get cut out.
What are you talking about? You're my
Sorry.
marketing company.
You teed it right up for me. I mean,
I did. That was my fault.
Okay, no. So seriously, check it out. We had a team, many teams over the years. You just had different journeys of teams. And Eric was great at it. That's why we call him the tech whisperer, because he would connect with them. And a lot of it was, and he'll embellish on this, but he would explain why to the guys. And he'd explain why it's important to communicate, why it's important to explain the process to the client when they start the job, why it's important to communicate at the end of the day, what was completed, what wasn't completed, and when you're going to be back. Why it's important you explain about the insurance information. When you explain why to somebody, they're going to be more engaged and more into doing it properly. And then also developing culture in your business. And it comes back to systems, because many people say, how do I get a culture in my business? It just doesn't happen. Yeah, it doesn't happen overnight. But when you set up systems to develop a culture where everybody interacts, where everybody communicates, where they're owning their what they're doing. They're not blaming each other, and everybody's accountable. You have systems that lead up to that, and then you have a great culture, and then they lean on each other. So you send one guy to a job that doesn't like talking, one guy does like talking, the guy that doesn't like talking doesn't mind doing it, and the other guy might want to do the technical work. So they use their strengths instead of trying to maximize their weaknesses, which isn't the best way to go about it. And
I love it.
I'm sure Eric's gonna have more input on different direction there.
Yeah, yeah. What do you think about that, Eric? Just building a system to kind of, develop that 5-star customer experience. I love the idea of just doing something as simple as explaining what you've done at the end of the day, right? Like that's just a simple little tip. Like talk to the client, tell them what you did that day. They're gonna love to have that information.
I'm gonna back up a step. So the reason we got into all of this is because we were having pain. We were having callbacks and complaints and frustrations and all the things. Larry runs around trade shows in a fireman's outfit because we would spend most of the day putting out fires instead of building our business, right? That's not why you go into business. And so, we went back and started listening to what the callbacks were. And they were almost never technical, almost never. Our guys liked and did a good job of the technical work, but they didn't have the, interpersonal skills, communication skills, life seasoning to create a 5-star service experience. And we had to recognize that although they were good at the technical, we had this whole chasm of skills that they just didn't have. So me being a systems person, I'm like, okay, well, I've got to build a system where we train these soft skills. And soft skills, they're everything to client experience because they don't know how to judge. The client doesn't know how to judge whether we're good at doing the actual work or not because they don't know how to do it. Mm-hmm. So what do they judge us on? They judge us on how they feel about it. Yeah. So we have to be really good about how we feel about it part. So I started having a morning huddle every day. Larry was losing his mind because he's sitting there adding up 30 X employees times X amount of dollars. And, Eric, why are we doing this? And I'm just like, look, we're spending that money anyway. We're spending that money on callbacks. We're spending that money in a myriad of ways. And at the beginning, I was just kind of making it up as I went along and just trying to explain to them how to communicate, how to talk to clients. And then over time, I was just like earlier on, I had been spending my time after work building systems. Now I was building lesson plans so that we could train these people. And, the amazing thing happened, Hayden, was that not only were they starting to learn how to do things that they didn't know how to do about, where to stand, how to walk, where to park, how to call the client, how to overcome an objection, how to diffuse an angry client. Like I'm actually giving them tools that they were previously nervous about. They were worried that if this stuff was going to happen because they didn't feel equipped to be able to do it. But in doing that, I was also investing in them. We talked about retaining staff. So if I'm investing in you as a technician, and usually they're kind of the lost tribe of every restoration company, right? Everybody, it's project managers and estimators, and there's the guys in the shop. Yep. All of a sudden, it's like, wait a minute, we're spending time every day trying to build you up as a human being. People don't leave that. Right. So, we'd have guys saying, look, I can go to XYZ company across town and make $2 an hour more, but I'm not going because they don't care about me like you care about me. And our retention was way up. Our callbacks went way down. We just built the system out of basically creating the theater of business. Like business is a theater, right? So if I'm going to go to a call, what am I going to do? I'll walk what we taught our guys. I'm going to call and say, hey, Hayden, I'm just finishing up my job now, heading your way. My GPS is saying it's going to be 35 minutes. I'm going to swing in a Starbucks and grab something. What would you like? Right. So all of a sudden I'm setting the tone, right? Yeah. I'm creating a raving fan before I've even arrived. And then sure enough, I show up on the time. And I park the van in a certain spot and I don't cut across the grass and I walk to the door and I have a script that I'm following for my initial meeting and walk through with them. And if I can do that over and over and over, that's 5-star review, 5-star review, 5-star review. Yep. And Josh and Jeremy talk about, if my team can pull that off, I'm going to have a way easier time getting paid.
Yeah.
And if I'm having issues with a carrier, and I'd like Jeremy and Josh maybe to take it from here, if I've created that great relationship as a company with that client's more apt to back me up in a negotiation. Am I off base on that? I mean, that was our experience.
You are 100% right there. Your client's going to go to bat for you. And anytime that adjuster, if the adjuster tries to get you kicked off the job or badmouth you to try to low pay that thing, that customer of yours is going to have your back all the way through.
Yeah.
That absolutely helps the payment process out.
Yeah.
Especially if that customer knows that they weren't here twiddling their thumbs, right? Like they were here working and they've worked hard and they've told me what they've been doing. Like, yeah, that's, again, seems like such an easy thing, but it's one more person you have on your side if you just communicate and talk to the customer about that stuff. Sorry, Josh, were you going to say something more there?
Nope, that's exactly right, Hayden.
Yeah. I would just add to that, like one of the things that restoration contractors have above a competitive advantage, frankly, is they are most likely the first on site. They're going to beat the adjuster to the home. You know, they're going to have the first interaction in a desperate situation with a homeowner, and it's your job. You get the advantage of being the first one there, right? When you leave that impression with them, and then the adjuster calls and says, "Oh, these guys do X, Y, Z. They whatever," right? The homeowner's going to say, "That was not the experience that I had with these guys. And now I'm going to call into question what you just said to me, insurance carrier, and what your intentions are. And also, you're not here. You don't even know what's happening here." Right? Like, and oftentimes this day and age, adjusters aren't even showing up on most jobs, right? A lot of carriers aren't even having the adjusters go out. And so they're never getting that. We should take advantage of that competitive advantage that we have as contractors, that we get the face time. And so why wouldn't we invest in our employees to maximize that competitive advantage that we get?
I love the way Jeremy just said that. Like I've never heard it said just like that. Like, hey, we actually have as restorers first on scene, the one working with you every single day, like we have a competitive advantage. Like, let's take that. I love that idea.
Yeah.
And Jeremy, we used to use that. So in creating all the scripting for when we would sit down and sell that loss as a first responder, one of the conversations that we would have with the client, all scripted, was, it is your right to use the contractor that you want. You do not have to go with a preferred vendor program. They cannot tell you to do that. So once you've already done that and built that trust, the chances of you getting kicked off a job are like so low.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, the legal term for what Eric just said is drawing the sting, right? It's what you're doing is you're saying, this is what they're going to come at you with, but you use it in a softer tone, a softer phrase, and the legal term is drawing the sting of, hey, they may call you and try to get their preferred vendor. Here's the XYZ reasons as to why they would do that. And then when they come in with it, they've already heard it. They're already ready for it. And it has less of an impact when the carrier tries to do it.
That's absolutely right. Hey, they told me you were going to say that. Shame on you, type of a thing. And it works. It really does. It does draw.
And there's many things and there's many other things that help the client as well. You can say, okay, when you're working on negotiating to get your house put back together, these are certain things that will help you as well, because they're not going to want to pay top dollar for everything when you deserve to get what you had before it started. So like what you're saying, the first on site, there's so many ways, and had to do with our scripts that would help benefit the client, especially. And that's who you're trying to help in the long run. So that helped a ton. I'm glad you brought that up. That was cool.
One of the things, Josh, you said last time we all did this together that has just really stuck with me over the last few days is you said, hey, you know what? When your clients like you, you're more likely to get paid, right? And that's the whole reason we do all of this. The reason we hire employees and train employees and go out on jobs is because we want to make some money. And I love that how you said that last time. You're like, hey, it is so much easier to go get you paid when your clients like you. And so it makes your job easier, as the guys going out there and negotiating this and trying to get you paid faster. I'd love it if you talk just a little bit more about what that looks like when you're working with the adjuster and you're trying to get that money to come in. How much of a difference does that relationship really make?
Yeah. So one of the best tools that a carrier has or an adjuster has is to turn the policyholder against the contractor, okay, against the water mitigation company or restoration contractor. The reason that is such an effective tool is because then the homeowner or policyholder can turn around and agree with the adjuster by saying, "Oh, you're right. They really weren't there that much. You know, $4,000, man, that is a lot of money, you know, for what they did. You're right. That really wasn't worth that much." And so the adjuster is going to be documenting all of this in their file as well. And now they've created a situation where they've really kind of stuck the contractor out on an island to get paid for their services. You know, there are things that a contractor can do to combat that with certificates of satisfaction and completion, those types of things where, you know, you have the customer sign it when you're done. And so when they do kind of go back on that, hey, you were happy before, what happened? You know, but the adjusters know that's a very effective tool for them to be able to low pay these claims, is to turn the policyholder against the contractor. So by keeping the policyholder on board and supporting what you did as being a good job and being fair and reasonable, the adjuster is the one stuck out on an island trying to, and they become the bad guy in all of it because they're trying to take advantage of both the policyholder and now the contractor, when those were the two people that really only did anything to put the house back together. Those are the two people that were affected. So yeah, absolutely. And by these processes, these procedures, these systems, like Eric was talking about, these are the ones, you know, you follow those things and your customer is going to like you. They're going to feel like you're professional and that you took care of them and made everything okay for them, that you were the hero in all of it. It's when your technicians start, you know, straying from those procedures and those policies, that's where the problems come in. But yeah, absolutely imperative. It not to mention it goes to give you better Yelp reviews, better online presence, you know, reviews on those type of things. So which ultimately brings, you know, more business that way, plus word of mouth. They're happy. They're going to be throwing your name out there to their friends and neighbors when they have water losses. So it's that first, you know, Jeremy talked about it being a competitive advantage, and it really is, because it's your opportunity to put your company's presence out there, and it can be future marketing at the same time.
Can I piggyback on that real quick, Hayden?
Go ahead, Eric.
So
Yeah.
Larry and I were nutty about getting 5-star reviews, right? And we've prided ourselves on that's what we were always shooting for. And one of the moves that we used to use was our other restoration company competitors. They all have like 2-star reviews and 2.5-star. So we used to literally, as part of the first responder, we'd be pulling up our reviews like, here's our 500 5-star reviews. Oh, look at this company. Ooh, look at that company. Look. And next thing you know, but the chances of getting kicked off that job because of that, exactly what Josh said, if you're using that for the next job and the next job, is almost zero.
Right.
And you want to know what's so interesting about this whole conversation, building relationships and having the competitive advantage and getting the reviews? Like what we see, the best reviews that we see out there for all of our clients, their companies are not leaving a review for the company. They're leaving a review for the person they worked with, right? And it's actually a strategy we teach our clients all the time when asking for reviews is you're going to have a lot better luck getting somebody to leave you a review if you have that tech or that project manager, the person they've been seeing every single day that they have a relationship with. If that's the person that asks, hey, could you leave me a review? That would really mean a lot to me. Guess what? As people, we feel more compelled to do that than if, you know, somebody sends an email that says, will you leave a review for our company? Well, what people want is that connection with the person they've been working with.
We used to pay bonuses for 5-star reviews from our guys, and we doubled the bonus if their names were in it.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So it gave them incentive to say, hey, Derek, you know, if you don't mind, could you put my name in there that I did, if you think I did a good job, because that makes me look good for my bosses or something. Right. And now, next thing you know, you've got this massive amount of Yelp reviews or Google reviews with all of your company's employees' names, it feels better to people who are checking, don't you think?
Oh yeah.
Definitely.
And it feels more legitimate just from like a digital marketing internet space, right? Like people aren't gonna be like, oh, they have 100 5-star reviews and they all sound very similar. People are gonna question that, right? But if they're personalized reviews with people's names in them, they're much more likely for a future customer to be like, oh wow, like these guys take care of their customers on a really personal level, to the point that, you know, they're mentioning technicians by name, they're mentioning employees by name. And so they're not just saying, good job, you know, good job, Super Tech U. They're saying, man, it was awesome to work with Eric, or, you know, good job, Spot On Solutions. No, it was really awesome to work with Katie or whatever. So it makes all the difference having that personal touch in those reviews, just from a digital marketing sense as well. So it's awesome. There's so many directions we could kind of go from here. And I think kind of the last piece that I really want to make sure we hit on, and we've been talking about it in multiple different senses here with the concepts that Jeremy's mentioned, with, you know, being the first person there and the first person on the scene, kind of that first responder mentality. But I want to talk specifically Josh and Jeremy and whoever kind of wants to lead on this. But, you know, the communication pieces are obviously crucial. Talking to these customers, telling them what's going on, what you're working on in their home. If you could kind of prioritize what you feel like are some of the most important pieces of information to communicate to the policy holder, the homeowner, what do you feel like those things are? Do you feel like it's what you worked on that day? Is it how is this going to work with insurance? You know, what do you feel like are some of the most important things for your technicians or technician, project manager, whoever it is, to talk to the homeowner about?
Yeah, so I'll start on that. And I'll focus mostly on probably the collectability aspect of the job, right?
Yeah, of course.
I'll let somebody else, you know, speak more to some of the during the job situation. But oftentimes what we hear is like, oh, they took out way too much, right? Oh, this contract was trying to take it out because of X, Y, Z. If you've armed your client with, hey, here's a moisture reader, think, look, it's wet. You know, oh, here's one right here. Oh, it's wet. You know, then when the adjuster comes in and says, hey, oh, they did way more than they should, they're armed with, no, I saw it. You know, I saw that it was wet. I saw that it needed to be taken out. Oh, category of loss, that makes sense because they told me the difference. They're telling me why I have to rip this carpet out because it's Cat 3, right? Or I can float this one because this is the category. If you're explaining this throughout the process, what they're going to get most oftentimes is sticker shock from an invoice, right? They have no idea how much this equipment costs. They have no idea how much it actually is costing to run a business with overhead profit, with the technicians that you're paying, with the certifications that you're getting, right? They have no idea of any of this. So they're going to say, wow, to demo my house, it cost me $5,000. If you just take 5 minutes and explain, hey, this right here's an air scrubber. You know, this retails for this amount of money, right? We're going to put this in your house. This is what it does. These air movers, you can see these at Home Depot. They're renting for $30 a day, right? That's with you monitoring, you picking them up, you plugging them in, you doing all that. We do them, our rentals, $28 a day or whatever, right? If you're just basically explaining some of the equipment, some of the costs, some of the rationale for why you're taking stuff out, it becomes a lot more confident for them to see a bill for $5,000. And then when the adjuster says, I'm paying $2,000, then they're going to say, I know who's hosing me, and it's not the contractor.
Yeah.
Right. That 5 minutes, 10 minutes of just communication is key. It's what's being said. And then frankly, how often you're following up just to open up the line of communication, right? Even if you're doing it, hey, just wanted to make sure Michael made it out there today, you know, and was able to check the levels. It sounds like, you know, you're probably a day away from dry. We'll be out there tomorrow. Oh, hey, I had a question about that. One of my pieces of equipment looks like it unplugged. Would you want me to plug it back? Right? You're just giving them an open line of communication to give their feedback to you. So what they're not doing is giving you their feedback through a 1-star review on Google. You know?
Right. Right. I love the transparency of cost, Jeremy. I think that's something that's lost in the in a lot of industries. That if we could even speak in more generalities outside of just restoration, right? Like I think transparency of cost is something that's lost in the world. And I love the idea of being like, hey, these things cost this would cost you $30 a day to rent, like, but we're going to rent it a little bit cheaper or similar price, but you don't have to worry about hauling it around and setting it up, right? Like I love that transparency aspect, because then you're right. Then when they get that final bill, it's a much more feasible number for them to be like, oh yeah, they had, 10 of those air movers in my house for a week. Like that's why it's cost this much, and it makes total sense to do that. I love that concept. And I think it's going to make things a lot easier in the future. Josh, any addition to that as far as just transparency when it comes to communicating about these pieces of information? Jeremy had some great thoughts, but anything additional to that? Anything you would prioritize when it comes to communicating?
Yeah, being an attorney, I know a thing or two about being shady, or at least people thinking I'm being shady.
Okay,
so
gotcha.
I wouldn't
tell don't tell people that, Josh. I wouldn't tell people you're an attorney. Like, let's keep that to yourself. Okay, yeah.
You're gonna edit that part out.
Yeah. We'll cut that out. Yeah.
But being transparent, like Jeremy was talking about, it's when a contractor tries to hide, maybe what they might be doing or charging to the insurance company. That's where the problems come in. That's when the sticker shock happens. But just being truthful and honest all the time, in what you're doing with these homeowners, and helping them understand the process and letting them be as involved as they want to be throughout everything, and helping them understand what the process is going to look like. I mean, it just, if I were to have a restoration company, those would absolutely be some of the key processes that I would put in place. Yeah. Because I think that customer service aspect gets solved so easily with that type of communication. It's like every relationship, you got to communicate to make it work, and that goes with your customers.
Yeah. I a lot of my clients, I end up, because we have their website information, we have, tracking set up to track their digital marketing. I end up listening to a lot of phone calls, and a complaint that I've heard before from a potential customer is, why was the bill this high? Your guys were only here a day, right? And I'm sure Derek has probably heard that complaint. Eric and Larry, everyone's probably heard that at some point in the restoration industry. Why was my bill this? Your guys were only here for one day or a couple of days. Like, why was it so high? And I think just doing something as simple as being like, hey, the reason your bill is going to be this is because we had all of these air movers, or we had to have some special equipment brought in to do this. Like, your cost to that customer might totally be justified, but just being communicating about that can make all the difference, so that you don't get those phone calls, so that their feedback, like Jeremy said, isn't in a 1-star review on Google down the road, right? Like just being open and upfront about some of that information. The job might have only taken you a day, but you didn't tell the customer why you were only there a day. And so I think just some simple things like that can really make all the difference.
Do that, Hayden, is, Larry and I very rarely had people complaining about the bill, and for one reason. So one of the things that you have to do on the initial inspection is find out what their deductible is. Well, finding out what their deductible is a wonderful way to start prepping them on what the price is going to be, right? So like if you're sitting there and say, oh, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, so do you know what your deductible is? I don't. Well, let's go find your paperwork right now. Okay, you have a $2,500 deductible. All right, let me talk to you about a job this size. Generally is this much to this much in a range for me to dry it out. And then seeing that, we know it's going to be about this much to this much to put it back together, right? So all of a sudden, before we've ever even cut 1 inch of drywall, they know the ranges for MIT and rebuild. And I think just by using that tool of like, what's your deductible, and then having that conversation, and if they want to ask questions on how come and how much, like Jeremy said, we're preparing them now to never have it be an issue. Larry, do you ever remember that being much of an issue for
Yeah.
us?
And the thing was, asking the deductible was sometimes, a challenge because people don't want to tell you all the time. But you say, I want to know your deductible is to make sure this is worth for you to file the claim. Because if your deductible is too high, you might not want to file a claim. And they're like, oh, okay, because you're helping them at that point. And then they're more apt to show, expose what they've got going on, see their deductible, and then they're more apt to believe you once they trust you because you're using their best interests. You're trying to help them, and then they can see that. Goes a long way.
Yeah, I love that. That's an awesome tip. Yeah, go
I
ahead.
was to add something. Yeah. Oftentimes you could say like, hey, and this is why we have property owners insurance, because these bills tend to get high, right? This is why we all carry this insurance on our houses, because these bills are high because we're going to take out, it's going to be expensive. We're going to put in, it's going to be expensive. But luckily for you, you're going to be on the hook for your deductible, right? And that's what you're going to be required to pay. And we'll work with your insurance, for the balance. But this is why we have insurance.
Yeah. It's totally a great conversation to have. And Larry, again, to your point, I've had, in my parents' home, we've had some water losses, and we've had conversations with, restoration companies, and that's totally, I guess, increased my confidence that they're going to take care of my parents, because they bring it up like that. They don't say, well, this is how much it's going to cost, that, and this is what we're going to need you to pay. They bring it up as, hey, this, what's your deductible? Because we might be able to not file a claim if it's under your deductible. Like, having those types of conversations can just build trust.
Yeah. And many times
with your customers,
sometimes these clients will have a $10,000 deductible, and you're like, wow, okay, we need to have a conversation here if you want to file this claim or not. Or even, or if it's only $1,000 deductible, and if it's a tiny loss and some plumber's pushing it, or the agent's like, just file, or, there's miscommunication running around, just guiding them in the proper direction makes you look like the expert and shows that you care about them. And it's an easy lead right from there.
it's awesome. Well, I don't want to, for the sake of time here, I don't want to bug you guys all too much more, but I think there's one thing that we could kind of wrap this up with. We've talked about some really, really awesome pieces of information here. When I first started here at Spot On Solutions, one of the very, very first meetings that I had here, we were talking about our clients, and Derek was Derek. I don't know if you remember this, but this was a meeting that you led, and we were having a conversation about how do we build relationships with customers, and how do we keep them with us long term here at Spot On Solutions. And it's a refrain that I've used multiple times between then and now. But you talked about, there are two reasons why a customer will stop using us here at Spot On Solutions, right? And I feel like this applies very, very closely to the restoration industry. There are two reasons. It's one, performance. They feel like maybe their marketing didn't perform how they wanted. There was an issue of expectation, something like that, right? But the second reason, and probably the majority of the reason that people might leave, is due to communication. I feel like that applies so heavily to our conversation today and our conversations going forward about building a business in the restoration industry, that you can really sum it up in those two things. And we talked obviously a lot about the second thing today, communication, but Derek, if you wouldn't mind maybe kind of closing us out with why you feel, I mean, obviously you've learned, you and Katie have learned over the years that it's those two things, but communication, in your opinion, is probably even much more important than the performance piece of it, right? And so why do you feel like that is such a crucial piece to this customer retention and 5-star experience?
Oh, awesome. I'm glad you asked me that, because you are right. Communication is like the most important thing. When I had my restoration company, as we built this digital marketing company, the one thing that I have learned in my years of doing this is, as a whole, I mean, as a majority, I think customers have grown to not like or trust contractors, right? And if anybody that's in the restoration industry works with subcontractors who come in and do a job, a piece of a job, just getting them to show up is oftentimes a big challenge. And the one thing that I holds true is, if in the absence of communication, your customers will let a whole lot of things go from a performance or from a work standpoint. But if you're communicating with them all the way along the path, but the minute you stop communicating, the minute you tell, they're expecting you at one time and you don't show up at that time, and you've neglected to give them a call and let them know, hey, I'm running a little bit late, or I've had something come up, we're going to be there a little bit later. As soon as you stop that, the cash in the bank starts going down. And I love that, Steve Toburin explained it to me a long time ago. He's like, you're making, as you get a job, you're making deposits in a bank, right? And every little thing you do in that with that customer in the positive is putting money into that bank, right? In slow little increments, but you're staying on the positive side. And you're putting them in, like I said, in small increments. But when you fail to communicate, there's big deductions that are taken out of that bank that you have to come back and try to build back up. And so it's so much easier, the whole process and all the way to getting paid, all the way to getting that review, is if you'll just learn how and do a great job communicating, and everything else will tend to take care of itself.
I love it. That's a great way to wrap up this episode. Derek, Katie, thank you for helping me kind of navigate this conversation today. Eric, Larry, Josh, Jeremy, this is amazing. This is super eye-opening for me. I love this episode. I think it was as good as the first episode. I think the conversation was awesome. You guys provided a lot of really, really great insight into how we build these relationships with customers and how you can grow your business this way. So thanks again for joining, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks,
Hayden.
Appreciate it.
This has been Success Elevated, making you a little bit better one show at a time. Thanks for joining us. Please subscribe on YouTube or any other major podcast platform to listen to more episodes. We are proudly brought to you by Spot On Solutions. If you'd like to learn more about how we can help you grow your business, please check us out at spotonsolutions.com.